Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's Thursday, which means it's time for the Cannabis Events Talk Show, hosted by Event High, and I am your host, Adelia Carrillo. Now, for those that are new here, the Cannabis Events Talk Show covers all things about cannabis events, experiences, and tourism. We keep you updated on the hottest topics, from current news, trends, interviews with special guests, to marketing tips, and so much more. Now, the lineup of the show, we invite a special guest to join us each week. We have a one-on-one kind of interview segment, and then each week we actually talk about a latest news article. Of course, it follows in line with our conversation focus, which is events, tourism, and hospitality. Now, after that, I will go over some of our regular updates, like our event of the week, and also highlight who our guest of the week is for next week. So, enough of that. Let's get to the good stuff. I am so excited to introduce you all to this week's guest, who I also am lucky enough to call friend, Philip. Philip is the founder, producer, and chief storyteller for the TV show Don't Strain Yourself, which educates adults about medicinal cannabis. Philip began his media career creating educational TV for NASA and was fortunate to have worked in the entertainment, marketing, and public relations communities. Philip believes that all cannabis is medicinal, and DSY explores Canna Travel Wellness destinations along with sharing patient stories and learning from medical and cannabis experts. Don't Strain Yourself actually lives on Altered TV platform, and they are available on Apple TV, Roku, and Google TV. If you want to learn more about Don't Strain Yourself, go to don'tstrainyourself.com. And with that being said, welcome, Philip.
Hi, good morning, Adelia. It's so nice to be here. Thank you. And I like being a special guest.
Yes, you're honorary guest in my books for sure. And did you notice I didn't want to butcher your last name? I was just like,
nice job, Gold Star.
But I shared a little bit about your background, but let's go a little bit deeper. What is your backstory and how did you get into the cannabis industry?
So, as you mentioned, I've spent the majority of my career in media, one form or another. I did kind of a left turn for about 10 years when I was raising my twin daughters. I was working the legal side of the advertising industry. And then when my girls were in high school, I had that itch to get back into creating content. So I founded and launched a company called Got a Story Media. And when I launched in 2018, I always knew that cannabis was going to be a part of that. I just didn't know to what degree, but I knew I was going to get involved in the cannabis community. And then in September of 2018, I heard Tracy Ryan speak at an entertainment conference of all things. And I heard Tracy speak about the medical issues with her daughter. And I walked out of that conference with a complete new direction in life. I was like, it was so impactful on me that I wanted to get deeply involved in the medicinal cannabis community, and started doing content. I was working a lot as a writer in 2018. And really enjoyed, because as a writer, you need to do your research, right? So you have to learn what you're writing about. I found that's very helpful. And so it was a great way to really get involved in the cannabis community and start learning. And with that process, I launched a podcast called Cannabis for the Rest of Us, which is how we first met back in the day when you were in San Diego, because I was trying to interview as many people as I could to learn and tell their story and what they were doing in the space. And Cannabis for the Rest of Us was launched because my first experience with having a medical marijuana card in California, my first experience to a dispensary, I thought I knew what I was doing. I had done my research, so I thought, oh, this is going to be not a problem. I walked in there and didn't have a clue. And the bud tender didn't have a clue. And I walked out of there with the wrong product. And that made me realize, hey, for those of us returning to cannabis after, for me, it was like 20 years, right? I hadn't used cannabis since I was a young man. So for people my age, 40 plus, coming back into this new world of cannabis, no one could explain things to me. And I thought, if I'm feeling that way, then there's a lot of people out there, a lot of adults that are feeling the same way. So I made it, my main mission to help educate older adults, again, 40 plus, about medicinal cannabis. And like you mentioned, even with adult use laws, I feel that all cannabis is medicinal. So even if you're using it in a social setting, you're still getting the benefits of that. So I launched Got a Story Media, and then during COVID was doing a lot of B2B work, and working for an SEO agency, which was great, and writing content. And it was such a great way to learn about the business side of the business.
Yeah.
But I wasn't telling the patient stories for why I got into this.
Yeah.
I was sitting at my favorite coffee shop in December of 2019, just asking the universe, okay, where am I going? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
And the universe responded by just saying, don't strain yourself. It literally just flew into my brain. And I'm like, oh, that's a great catchy title. So I looked to see if the URL was available really quick, and it was. And I texted my wife, said, hey, should I buy this? Should I just do this? And she's like, why haven't you? So Don't Strain Yourself was originally ideated as an event/media company. In other words, bringing in older adults to dispensaries, putting on an educational panel with a cannabis professional or medical professional to help educate older adults. Well, COVID, of course, changed all of that. And so it flipped more of a media company. And the show Don't Strain Yourself is a half-hour TV show, as you mentioned, on the Altered TV platform. We're also on YouTube and this and that. But the whole idea is to help educate people through a TV show. And we just finished season 2, and season 2 is all about cannabis travel, and it's something that I'm really excited about.
Yes, no, it is. We've obviously, as you mentioned, we've known each other for a while now, and just seeing this evolve, and even too, just catching up behind the scenes, hearing the passion that was just like, I'm doing Don't Strain Yourself, all the good things that you guys are working on. You can tell this is something that's like really, your passion, and it's really needed, and it's exciting to see. And even too, that hopefully that event component will still be out there, once things, once that the community is in a better way to do that for them. That is going to be a great way too, to bring them together and learn as well.
And it's so important. And it's so important to talk about those events. And again, because it normalizes things, right? Yeah. It's like one of the travel aspects that we try to include in each Don't Strain Yourself episode dealing with Canada travel is, okay, what is it going to be like when you get there? How do you access legal marijuana, legal cannabis? How do you access it? What are the local laws? I mean, what can you do? Right? Can you consume in public? Can you smoke in public? What are some of those things? What's the political climate of it, right? I mean, what is the overall vibe of being there? But the main thing is, educating people about it in a TV format of what can you do once you get there. So it's not just, using cannabis, just in your hotel room or B&B, although that's fine and that's all good. We all know that. But what can you do in an enlightened state? I mean, what are some of the benefits and the events and activities where you're at that might be enhanced by cannabis? And that's something that we always try to explore. What can you do?
Yep, exactly. So let's dive into that more, so Don't Strain Yourself. You mentioned the Canada travel series, and that was the recent series. Yeah. There's now also another series that's coming up, or is it always going to stay as travel? Or is that going to be an ongoing series and then you have multiple?
See, that's a great question. And that's what I love about our format is that we're really flexible. So season 1 on Altered TV was a mix of patient stories, telling patient stories. I mean, right down to questions like, how do you talk to your family about cannabis? Right? Those kind of little things. How can you address it with friends? Right? And then also learning from cannabis professionals. We did an interview with Autumn Brands, a cultivator up in Santa Barbara County, who it's majority owned by women, and I just liked the brand. I was a fan and reached out to them and said, hey, let's do an episode. So, supporting cultivators is very important to what we're trying to do too. So season 1 was all about that kind of thing, patient stories, medical and cannabis professionals. And that's a big part of what we're doing going forward. Season 2, we did 4 episodes in season 2. The first one was on the Desert Hot Springs Inn in Desert Hot Springs, California, which was the first cannabis-friendly hotel in SoCal, right?
Yeah.
So we went down there and did a story. We interviewed a couple people from the hotel, which was awesome. We interviewed the mayor pro tem for kind of the political aspect of what's going on in Desert Hot Springs. And then we went to a dispensary to talk to them. So in other words, we're trying to show the love with, hey, how can you use it?
Yep.
What is the law? What are the politics? And oh, by the way, where can I get cannabis? So if we can share all that, and everybody wins, right?
Yep, exactly.
That was episode number 1. Episode 2, we focused on West Hollywood, California, and the Emerald Village, West Hollywood. Great organization that's promoting that very thing of, hey, if you're looking for a cannabis travel experience, West Hollywood is kind of a place to go, right? I mean, and we know, the history of West Hollywood and how important it was to medicinal cannabis in this state, going back to Prop 215. AIDS patients and cancer patients, in West Hollywood were very vocal in the in Southern California to help get Prop 215 passed. So there's that element of it that we wanted to talk about, but also, again, what do you do in West Hollywood when you're enjoying cannabis? And there's so many things to do, right?
Yeah.
And then episodes 3 and 4 were all about Puerto Rico, which is a medicinal cannabis program. And Adelia, I got to tell you that the Puerto Rico episodes completely reignited my passion for telling those medicinal cannabis stories. And the way it all came about is my wife is in the health and wellness space, and she wanted to go to a conference in Puerto Rico. And as a spouse, I could attend for like $1, right? Yeah. It wasn't like, it's an extra $400. It was like, no, it was like $1 or whatever it was, right? So my wife really wanted to go. And I said, well, let's go. Yeah. And I thought, wait, I'm a producer of a TV show. And there's medicinal cannabis in Puerto Rico. Maybe we should do an episode. And so I didn't know anyone there. I'm not really connected. I reached out to a few people here in my community. No one really had any connections in Puerto Rico. So in social media, I just started reaching out to people to say, hey, I'm going to be on the island in April. What can we do? And so I would have been happy with 2 interviews. If I had done 2 interviews with the help from my production assistant wife, I could turn it into an episode, right? Yeah. We ended up doing 8 interviews. So I had enough material for 2 episodes. That's huge. The thing what inspired me so much was how professional the entire medicinal cannabis program is in Puerto Rico. And this is a good example. So everyone, no matter if you're an incoming bud tender or a physician or nurse, you have to be certificated for cannabis education on the island, no matter what any other credentials you have, whether you have a college degree or not, or a medical degree or a nursing degree, whatever that may be, you still need to be certified on the cannabis side of things. So, and not only that, you have to take continuing education classes. Right. So the bud tenders wear scrubs in the dispensaries. It's like they have created a whole new professional class based on cannabis in Puerto Rico. And it is so professional. And what's fascinating, and this is mentioned in the episodes, so Hurricane Maria took place in 2017, which just laid waste to the island. I mean, they were recovering, but you still see signs of it, even in San Juan, right? Wow. So a lot of younger people went to, Florida and other parts of the mainland for economic opportunity, right? Yeah. So what ended up happening is that it's the older adults that are supporting the medicinal cannabis program. And it has, yes, there was some stigma involved, as we all know in this business. That's why it's so important to talk about it. And several guests told me that, yes, the Catholic Church obviously plays a role. It's a heavily Catholic society. And so to be able to change minds about the approach to cannabis medicine because it works has been, in my opinion, nothing short of revolutionary for the people in Puerto Rico. So it completely warmed my heart to do 2 episodes there. And the nickname or logo for Puerto Rico is the Enchanted Island, right? So we like to look at it like Enchanted by Cannabis, and that's the name of the 2-part episodes.
Oh, let's go. I will have to definitely tune into that because that's fascinating. And 2, as you're stating that, it also makes sense. They're creating this environment in these dispensaries that remind remind their audience or the medical users of like a doctor's facility. They're used to this. So it gives them this safety of like, okay, I'm comfortable. I'm familiar with this kind of environment. And it's not intimidating,
Exactly.
because for anyone, it doesn't matter what age you are. If you haven't been into a dispensary, it is intimidating. There's so much you don't know that, it can be overwhelming. So that's a good approach.
And in fact, to your point, Adelia, I was allowed to shoot in a dispensary, right? It was like one of those last minute things. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm a friend of so-and-so. Is it okay if we come in and, shoot in your, do video in your dispensary? And the owner was like, yes, but you can't go in the back because that's patient confidentiality. And I was so impressed by that. I mean, I would have been very sensitive to that anyway, right? Of course.
Yeah.
You're in a medical setting, here, I'm here with my camera. Can I shoot you? You need to be discreet. You need to be cool. Yeah. But I thought it was great that it's like, no, you're not going back there. This is a medical office visit. And again, it gets back to that whole concept of how professional it is and how serious they take it. And even when adult use, I mean, I'm assuming adult use will happen there somewhere, like everywhere, especially when it becomes federally legal at some point. Right. I think because of the way Puerto Rico started, I'm hoping and I'm thinking they're going to maintain a medicinal slant just because of the professional class that they've started. And it just made me so happy to do that. And I can't wait to go back. I mean, I tell everyone that I'm involved with, those are just not going to be 2 episodes. I'm angling to find out how I can figure out how to go back and tell more stories.
There we go. And so, kind of to go more into that just a little bit further, why do you think now more than ever it is really travel or cannabis tourism is being really accepted in the US, but more outside of the US? I mean, I know Puerto Rico is a territory, but, just those other countries as well. Why do you think it's picking up this cannabis tourism, cannabis travel?
Well, I think there's 2 things going on. Obviously, the COVID pandemic. Yes, we all know we're still in it, but we also realize that things are opening up and people are traveling again, right? So I think that's a big thing. And I also think it plays into it that wellness travel is a thing, especially coming out of COVID. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how history writes this whole period of our pandemic, right? But I think it's fascinating that people, especially older adults, are seeking wellness opportunities. And fighting that stigma of using wellness medicine and cannabis medicine while you're traveling, it's not just the party scene, right? We all know that is an element to it, but people are beginning to understand, and even corporations outside of the traditional cannabis space are beginning to realize there are different types of cannabis travelers. And for the older demographic, let's say 40 plus, right? Who's got the money, who's got the time, and who's got the health for the most part to travel? That tends to skew older. So I think it's really important, especially in the international space. You look at what Thailand is doing, right? Thailand, yes, they're medicinal, but they're actually creating wellness zones where you can go to as a tourist, get your credentials, right? You have to do it legally. If you step outside of those laws, that can be an issue. But that's why it's so important to kind of know what the laws are before you go, right?
Exactly.
But what Thailand's doing, and what Spain is doing. Spain is perfect. Yes. It's kind of the speakeasy system, right? Like Salt Lake City used to be before the Olympics, where you kind of had to know someone to go to a bar, or we'll give you a membership so you can be a member of our bar so you can drink alcohol. My understanding, Barcelona is kind of the same way, where it's it's kind of an underground thing, kind of a quasi-legal thing. But how great that'll be when it's completely above board, and the rest of Europe. So I just think that people are beginning to realize that it's not just the stoner set. It's older adults that are interested in wellness, and cannabis is just part of the experience. And that's what I'm trying to do with Don't Strain Yourself, is to let not just people like us know about it, but government officials, event people, that are outside of the cannabis space, that how can they bring in cannabis patients and people that use cannabis to what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to add too is, even if you look at, so I was researching more on Jamaica, and in Jamaica, how they have it is they have a startup started an app where you can go in, and it's for all components. It was when, for COVID safety, but two, also for getting like a day pass, what you were saying, for them to easily be able to come in, get to that town, become a member or a medical patient for the day, and then they can go and purchase their cannabis. I found it so interesting. We do have Joey in the house. He says hello, and he said to look at Uruguay or Uruguay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. But now let's go on to a couple of the other questions that we have. So, what are some, I know we actually kind of dove into this, but what is one that really stuck out that you haven't mentioned yet? What is one interesting thing that you learned through your Canna Travel series that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think the fact that we're all still fighting that stigma. Our friend Philip posted on LinkedIn today, the same thing, even in Colorado tourism, right? Where he's getting pushback from elected officials. And that's one reason, again, why DSY wants to talk about the political climate, to not to pressure local officials or politicians, but to encourage them to be open to this. So to your point, Adelia, I think that is still the biggest thing we all need to do, is to overcome that stoner syndrome. Like, for instance, on DSY, we're not going to talk about 420. We're not going to talk about 710. We're not going to talk about getting stoned, right? Because that's not what we're trying to do with the show. We're talking about using it from a medicinal standpoint. And so to help alleviate that stigma, the fact that, we're talking about it today, helping to spread that word that, hey, you know what? This is a normal thing.
Yeah. Yep. I also wanted to say, so Lynn is also enjoying the show today. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for tuning in. Now, you've also attended many events over the years, obviously, prior to COVID. But as this industry continues to evolve, what is one piece of advice you would have for event organizers in the industry?
I think it's important for event organizers to know their demographic, right?
Yes.
I think that sounds so simple, right? Oh, you should know who's coming to your event. But what is the messaging saying about your event, and who are you trying to attract? Again, it gets back to, hey, is this a party, right? Or is this a festival, or what have you? Or is it more of a wellness experience, right? Because you don't want to alienate people. Like I say all the time on Don't Strain Yourself, it's not about babes and bongs, right? Yeah. We've seen that kind of advertising. We've seen that, for lack of a better expression, cannabis porn, right? Yeah. Where it's all about the smoke and, taking a hit off a bong, or the smoke coming out in a dark room, that kind of thing. Yeah. I'm not trying to, denigrate that type of marketing. It's just different. So know who are you trying to attract this event. And one of the things I love this year, and Brian Applegarth from the Cannabis Travel Association International has been really involved in this, cannabis event at state fairs, right? I absolutely love that. I'm from rural Michigan, right? That's where I grew up. So the whole 4-H thing and getting that blue ribbon because you won something at at the county fair, that was a big deal where I grew up. Yep. And I've actually written about, why isn't cannabis in farmers markets, right? Yep. Why isn't it at state fairs? And so the fact that that's now happening in California for the first time, where cannabis is being judged at the California State Fair, I think it's tremendous. And so again, back to your point, Adelia, is who is that event for, and who are you trying to attract in your messaging, and who else is going to see that messaging, right? Yeah.
So true. So true. And no, you bring up a great point too about the state fair. And even now, there's one I just saw on Event High. It's the Mendocino's Producer Guild. They're now starting to host these farmers markets because, like you said, now they're able to. And I am curious. I haven't been to one of it yet, but I would love to see themselves integrate other non-cannabis, so that maybe the regular farmers markets will one day look at that the other way around,
Exactly. I think you're exactly right. And also for cultivators to be able to bring people to their farms as a tour and to be able to sample the product instead of having a separate license. To me, that is just so crazy that, hey, you can come to our cannabis farm, but oh no, you can't try the cannabis here because we're not licensed as a dispensary, right? Yeah. So that's one change that I really want to see happen. So when you go to a farm, it's like, here it is. No different than a wine tasting, right? Yeah, exactly. And California can lead the way on that, just like Napa Valley and Sonoma, County has done with wine. Let's make that happen for the cultivators and help them.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, and I think, I'm hopeful that things will turn around. I think we're seeing kind of the hurdles and challenges that are facing California, but all the changes now that have happening. The cultivation tax is getting removed, the allowing of cannabis farmers markets. So, I'm excited and hopeful for California. It is the biggest market out there. We need to make sure these farmers survive through it.
Exactly.
So,
And it is so important to support them. It
yeah.
just is. And so, again, that's something that we're trying to do with Don't Strain Yourself, is do more stories on farmers and cultivators, and hopefully, encourage them to have tours and then show people what it's about, right? I mean, what happens on a cannabis farm tour, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
other events associated with that. So, yeah, that's something that's really important to us.
That's awesome. Now, so we have the patient stories, we have the Canna Travel series. You also just mentioned now, telling the farmers' stories and journey as well. What else do you have in store for 2022?
So we're in the process. My co-producer and co-host Lynn Mack and I are going through planning season 3, and season 3 is going to be circling back to some more patient stories, because again, telling patient stories about how they use cannabis is very important to us, because it's a great way to learn, right? And again, by targeting the older adults, that's our audience. That's who we're trying to speak to. Is, hey, you might not know how to use a flower vape. Like for me, for instance, I use cannabis every day. I vape dry flower, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do. I mean, I also enjoy some edibles too, but for me, as a former asthmatic, smoking is not the thing for me. I just don't enjoy it. Using concentrates or oil still is really hard for my lungs, so it's not something that I enjoy, but I still enjoy the ritual, going back to my 16-year-old self, that ritual of preparing flour, right?
Yeah.
By grinding it, by smelling it, like seeing that bud in your hand before you grind it. But then, using how do you use a dry vape? What's the best way to go about it? So we think it's really important to keep telling patient stories. Also, to be telling the stories from both medical professionals and cannabis experts, because everyone brings a unique perspective. So that's really what we're doing with season 3, is telling some more patient stories and medical and cannabis experts. And then season 4 will circle back to more of the cannabis travel things, because that takes a little bit more planning, right? You need to set, because you need to travel to go,
Yes.
right? But that's kind of our plans for right now, is concentrating on patient stories for season 3, and getting back into the cannabis travel things for season 4.
Yeah. Have you experienced any of those kind of like, we have bed and breakfast or cannabis friendly like Airbnbs at all? Have you looked into those? Or I don't know if there's anything interactive.
I haven't yet. I have not experienced that. But I think that business model is really appropriate too, because again, you're going to need to know the rules of what's the deal with that particular Airbnb. Even though they're cannabis friendly, what does that really mean? Can you light up a joint or smoke a bowl in the living room, or are you supposed to do that outside? In other words, are there designated areas? So learning the ropes of what you're allowed and not allowed to do, I think is really important. But that idea, again, it normalizes it, Adelia. It's like, yeah, we're going to a B&B. Yeah. We just happen to be, using cannabis with the blessing of the owner, and we're not sneaking out on the front porch unless we're supposed to, right? And normalizing that. So I've not experienced that yet. Certainly hope to, right? Yeah. But giving another shout out to the Desert Hot Springs Inn. One of the questions we ask is, what do people do when they come here and enjoy cannabis? And yes, there's a million things to do. If you're an outdoorsy type, you like hiking, that's all great, Joshua Tree, and there's other trails nearby. But if you just want to come and relax in the sun in Desert Hot Springs and enjoy cannabis, it's perfect, right? Because it's a boutique setting, it's relaxed, people are chill, and you're surrounded by people who aren't going to be upset, right? I mean, you're using cannabis in public. Oh my God, what a concept.
Well, we have to change it up now to our news article component, but I enjoy obviously our conversation, and we could go on, I'm sure, for a long time. I always enjoy our conversations. I learned so much from you, and I really appreciate your time that you always have given me, and even today for joining me.
Oh, and I tell you what, the work that you're doing is just so very important, and your show is so very important. And so again, it's a genuine honor to be a special guest.
Well, let's now get into the news component, and we can start diving into that conversation too. Okay, so now for those that are tuning in, as I mentioned, we do highlight one news article of the week. I'm going to give a brief overview, and then Philip and I will just kind of give our thoughts on it and kind of dive more into this topic as a whole. So this week's article is South Africa's Soweto holds first cannabis festival. And so what happened, it was the first of its kind, a 3-day cannabis festival was concluded in the mostly Black suburb Johannesburg called Soweto. Organizers used this event as an educational opportunity to disseminate positive information about the plant as South Africa moves forward on reform. While similar events actually have also happened in Cape Town and Sandton, the Soweto's first cannabis festival actually gave entrepreneurs a way to showcase their products while building their network within the industry. It also dives in more into the history of, what it looks like for cannabis legalization in South Africa. But one thing that I can't share with you all, but I'm not too sure if you were able to watch it, Philip. There was a YouTube of a news reporter who went there for the festival. And it's so cool. Like, again, you get to see these entrepreneurs passionate about what they're doing, highlighting their business. And again, it's a reminder, this is a global industry. There are entrepreneurs building for this plant, educating for this plant everywhere,
And it's so important. And then the news reporter was like, traditional news, right?
Yeah.
And what I always find interesting about that is you can tell right off how that reporter or producer is going to be treating it by how the languages they use, right? Are they a friend or foe of the industry? You can tell right away. Yeah. And the thing that's so great about what South Africa is doing is it's starting with education, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like, hey, here's a thing. And I don't know about South Africa's, history with cannabis over time, whether it's been cultivated there, like, obviously in some other parts of the world where cannabis has been part of cultures and subcultures for thousands of years. I have no idea what the history of cannabis is in South Africa. But the point is how are they starting out? They're starting out by educating people. And again, this is a normal thing. It is not scary. We are not all stoners. No. This is what we're using it for and putting them on the international map. I mean, it'd be fascinating to go there. I would love that. And not just because they have fantastic motorcycle roads in South Africa. All right, started. Right.
That's cool. Yeah. So, and that was it, really finding out a little bit about the history and just that I get, what really caught me was I really thought it was their first cannabis event. And then the article dove in and said there were a couple others, but again, this was a different approach. This was more highlighting entrepreneurs and businesses. And so again, kind of giving that this is an industry in South Africa was kind of what it seemed like with this event. And it was 3 days. Like, we know how it is producing 1-day events. They did a 3-day event.
Yeah, not a lot of sleep for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. But now, before I let you go, is there any final words, any call to actions? I'm sure there's people that are listening that now maybe want to get involved with Don't Strain Yourself. How can they support, or how can they get involved?
Well, I think it's really important to be a vocal part of your community, of your cannabis community and your community at large, right? It's up to all of us that are trying to change that conversation from, Stonerville to Happyville, right? There is a difference. Yeah. So you can do little things. If you see a news article that again, from a media perspective, that might not be complimentary towards cannabis, why not reach out to that reporter on social media and say, hey, wait a minute, this is my experience, right? So everyone can be involved in this effort to help change things. And we all know that at some point it will be federally legal. At some point, we don't know what that's going to look like. But each of us can do our own little thing locally, right? Like, think globally, act locally. From the Sierra Club, I love that expression and that motto. Yeah. So, also we love for people to subscribe and watch. Don't Strain Yourself on Altered TV platform. You can find it easily by Don't Strain Yourself, and just getting in touch with us to say, hey, I've got a great idea for a story. We love to hear from people about topics that we might not have been on our radar. So, getting involved with us either through don'tstrainyourself.com or on the platform, let us know what you're thinking, and we'd love to hear from people.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you again, Philip, just for joining, for, educating me as always, and just a good conversation. You always bring good vibes, and I'm glad this worked out. I'm glad you're able to join me.
Oh, that was so much fun, and it's so nice to see you. I can't wait till we see each other in 3D, though.
Yeah, right? Yes, yes. Well, again, thank you, Philip. And everyone else, we are almost done with the show. I just have a couple more updates. So, next week's guest, we have Madeline of Irie Weddings and Events. And then what is going to be this week's event of the week? So this week's event of the week is the 2022 Los Angeles Expo and Mixer, hosted by the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. Now, this event will include leading trailblazers in the consumption lounge and event spaces. And it's actually going to follow up with another event on July 28th that'll be the virtual component of this. So if you're interested in wanting to make some connections, this is a unique opportunity for brands and manufacturers to connect with delivery, distribution, and retail operators. You can learn more about this event on eventhi.io. And again, it's the 2022 Los Angeles Expo and Mixer, hosted by the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. And with that being said, as always, it's great to well, I don't see you, but it's great that you guys are all tuning in today. And stay safe, stay healthy, stay high. Bye.